we tried to get this meeting off the ground back in, I think it was January, February time, and it was kiboshed by COVID then. And at that time, I'd have been quite honestly able to introduce you to one of Lancashire's and Blackpool's hidden gems, which is Hangar 42. But they've hit the big time since then. They've been all over the BBC News, and they've, as I said, they've gone in leaps and bounds. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Coombs and the guys for from Hangar 42 to speak to you and to enthrall you this evening. Thanks very much.
Good evening, Chairman. Nothing like building the part up there, Roger. Thank you very much. I feel like the spotlight's on me now. We're under pressure, being a TV star. Keith, who's going to be speaking to you tonight, he's an old hat at this. We called him Limelight Maddock. He's used to be in front of the camera, so he's probably a lot more photogenic than myself as well. So, but thanks for inviting us to speak with your members tonight. We are here in Blackpool at Blackpool Airport, Hangar 42, in an original 1939 Bellman hangar. So this was the very first hangar built in May 1939, ready for the outbreak of World War II. So what we're going to do is we've done quite a lot of work here over the 5 years that we've been here. Well, 3 years, because we've had 2 years off with COVID. What you've got to remember when you walk around this building is when we got here, it literally had been bricked up after the war. So none of the ancillary rooms that you actually see existed. They were all full of rubbish. The volunteers shifted 48 tons of rubbish out of the ancillary rooms. The hangar floor was just awash with bird mess, and obviously, you know, in a pretty dilapidated state. So, you know, Roger's quite right. We've put a lot of time as volunteers into the project. £12,000 a year on average it's cost us to actually refurbish this hangar back to the current state it's in, and hopefully you'll hear some more announcements in the coming weeks and months with regards to some of the projects that we've got on. So you know, we're fortunate now that we have quite a few of the Spitfires that are out in the UK stay over with us here in Hangar 42, and in fact the Polish heritage flight Spitfire has just left a few hours ago for a tour of Northern Ireland before returning to Hangar 42 this Sunday. So again, keep your eyes out on our website and social media pages, because there'll be some good stuff coming up if you're interested in the aviation in general, and certainly the World War II subject matter. So what we'll do, we'll aim to finish the talk and the tour at about quarter to 9. We'll let you have 15 minutes of questions if you've got them, Roger. So we'll switch from the mobile phone back onto the laptop. So there might be a bit of pressing and pushing of buttons and trying to get it ready for the questions, so we can hear your members. So, you know, please feel free, guys, at the end to ask us ask us questions. Don't be too shy. But what I'll do is I'll hand you over to Keith Maddock now, who's our resident expert on the aviation and one of our chief engineers in respect of repairing and restoring some of the items that you'll see tonight. So I'm just going to flick the screen, if you don't mind. Excuse my finger while I do it. There we go. So we're in front of the operations room now. So I'm going to hand you over to Keith Maddock now, and just wave, Roger, if you could. If you can't hear us very well, just let me know. Wave your hand or whatever. If you can't really hear us properly. Okay, so Keith, over to you.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me okay. Do I sound okay?
Brilliant. Sound okay to me, Keith.
As John said, operations room, what is it? Well, you're going on an operation. In the aviation industry, military aviation, you're going on an operation. Even airlines use it. It's an operational aircraft. So in we go. Have a little look around in here. This room was an absolute tip. So imagine the work we've carried out here. And if we pan over to the board here, we have the operations board. So you have the date of the flight, the type of aircraft we're flying in, the crew, particularly the pilot and navigator, what your duty is that particular night or day, time out, time back to the airfield, and any history of damaged aircraft, such as that would be a Hangar bomber destroyed, and as such. For those who don't know, and it's surprising how many people don't know what Luftwaffe means, or Luftwaffe, it is simply Air Force. So Luft is air, for those who don't know. Waffe or Waffen is forces, or forces. So they called our Royal Air Force the British Luftwaffe. Sounds a bit odd, that, doesn't it? However, in this room, we also have the photo reconnaissance stuff. So if anybody's been involved in photo reconnaissance, highly important. So obviously we have the giant cameras and the gun cameras in the top, which actually, before you put an army over ground, you need to know what's on the other side. Right, so if you just, I'll describe that now, because it was found out in the First World War. Imagine a two-seater biplane, all wooden string affairs, and you have a man in the back with a big camera, monstrous great wooden thing with plates. You take photographs and you draw maps of what's going on in the German lines. Because as you know, if you put a platoon into a forest or over a hill or into land, and they've got many assets, you're going to cause havoc. And you're going to lose your platoon, and it's happened. So photo reconnaissance started then, but of course the German forces would shoot at the aircraft. Vice versa, we would shoot at their aeroplanes. So they started to fit machine guns so that they could sort of shoot back at other aircraft, because now the birth of the fighter is coming on board. Somebody decides, oh yeah, we'll put a pair of twin machine guns on the nose, fired through the propeller arc of the aircraft, in some cases, and shoot down other aircraft. Now, it's a known fact that American general said in the First World War, aeroplanes are of no physical use to the military conflict arena because they're too weak and wouldn't. Well, how wrong could that be? As we know today, the biggest asset, in fact, aircraft destroyed the battleship era. So we're going to walk you further around. It is the fact that fighter aircraft and fighter tactics started, and the word dogfight came in. If you don't understand that, you see two dogs fighting, it's very closely enmeshed, teeth snarling, and of course it is in a dogfight, which is close up and personal. So if you look in here, we've got plenty of artifacts for people to browse. The ubiquitous officer's kit, tin hat, gas mask bag that everybody was issued to and thankfully never needed in World War II. Actually, it would protect you against a smoking building. So if your building was bombed, you could pop that on and hopefully you could get out. So the actual gas mask did actually come into photo, not taking particles as it was burning. Very nice, great coats because of the British weather. Now we'll just move into the NAFI, because everywhere marches on it, armies march on the stomach. So we just look at this. Very briefly, we're just going to walk through here. This is our NAFI, and of course it's for customers, and of course we use it as well for the team. So we'll just carry on through. We don't want to. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Some of you will remember these products on the walls, guys. I don't want to put you on the spot and embarrass you, but. There you go, into the hangar now. Okay, we'll just go straight through to the...
Yeah. Right, we're just going to walk down here now. We have plenty of artifacts to look at in a few moments. We don't want to rush it, but we've got the scramble bell.
Do my tinnitus any good, that.
Yeah. Now, we're in the briefing room. We're going to pass through the briefing room reasonably quickly because the rescue crew have briefed here on the mission. And debriefing officer would sit here. When you get back off a mission, you tell him what you've done, what you've seen, and what you've achieved, and anybody who's missing, if we can do that. We carry on. You've got the various boards with instructions on, which give you wind, speed today, elevation, check your guns, check your equipment before you fly, vitally important. I will expand on that a little bit later. Airfield wind direction arrow. So we're showing now that we're going to take off this way. That is not the direction arrow, that's it, which way we're taking off. And of course, that's down to the air traffic people as well. As we finish the tour, a very quick tour, because you want to hear the dogfight tactics, we are now in the Dispersal Hut. In this very seat would sit the squadron leader. The squadron leader's in charge of a group of aircraft, maybe 18 Spitfires, Hurricanes, whatever it may be. His job is to lead his team to get the job done. If you look in here, we have plenty of artifacts and they are waiting for one thing, and that's this. Hello? Squadron, scramble! And out you go. You've got to go now. There's no sitting about. There's no cups of tea. You're going. Because the radar girls, particularly women, have picked up the raid. Now, the quicker you react, the more aircraft you're going to kill. And it is a kill over water and certainly over grass fields. You don't want to hit a heavily laden ankle bomber over London, Margate, wherever it is, and drop that right into the town, because they're achieving what they want to do, and that's to destroy a big portion of the town. So you're trying to shoot them up over the countryside. When you get back off the mission, you're going to see the squadron leader immediately goes to guns on the typewriter. This has two reasons. One is the mission report that has to go to the higher command, and anybody missing. If they're missing, you never ever say killed in action. You would say missing in action. You don't know if they're bailed out in the water, they could be picked up. If they were seen to blow up, and many did, you don't know. They could have been thrown out of the aircraft. If you're in over France and the resistance people have picked you up, it will be 3 to 4 months before you might hear anything, because they're not going to phone you and say, oh, by the way, we've got a Alan blah, blah, blah. For obvious reasons, their lives are at great risk. Or if the Germans have got you, you're a prisoner of war, they contact Geneva and they say, Flight Lieutenant Keith Paddock is now a guest of the German armed forces for the rest of the war, but he's alive. We did the same for their pilots. That is to inform, so all your relatives would know you're a POW, and they would do that. What we're going to do now, guys, is move out to the aircraft side, because I'm sure you want to hear about the dogfight tactics and what the Germans were getting up to destroy a lot of our aircraft. So we'll just walk back a little bit quicker, and then when we get to the aircraft, all will become clear. I'll go to Lucy. We're just passing by various cases. We have lots of things on display, and we do talk to the public about these. So if you guys want to come along and visit us, we're open every Saturday, right up until November. Right, so I'm just going to stop us here because we're going to look at this here. Vicky is a Mark II Spitfire. Reginald Mitchell from Stoke-on-Trent, born in Stoke-on. In fact, funnily enough, we got an invite to go there a little later this year as a memoriam to Reginald Mitchell, born in Stoke-on-Trent. He had a vision. That became that vision. He designed the Schneider Trophy seaplanes that won the Schneider Trophy before the war off the Italians with his team of engineers, and developed high-speed flight at the time, 407 miles an hour, which was incredible. It was especially with floats on the Supermarine S61 or Seafire, Racer rather, not the Seafire. So if you look at Vicky, just pop in a little bit more. She has 4 red squares on the wings. Those red squares are the machine gun, behind there are the Browning machine guns. We'll just let you have a little look at those here. And if anybody's wondering, this device is by all aircraft, and it's what we call a Trolley or Trolley Accumulator. It's a series of batteries to start that very big engine. And when I show you the engine, you'll understand why a small car battery wouldn't even turn it. Okay, so as we proceed, we see the 4 Browning machine guns underneath. These are 303 ammunition. I will take you through the ammunition shortly. Bear in mind the figure 303, and I will get back to that. So now I'm going to show you something. As John picks back, the barrels of the guns, that's 4 per side, 8 in total, are slightly harmonized in ahead of you. So the barrels are brought in so that you have crossfire. If you can bathe an aircraft in crossfire, 8 streams of bullets, you have a fair chance of chewing it to bits, and that's your job. The problem is, it's a 303 round, And I'm just going to, when we get to the ammunition stage, I'll just tell you why that was a little bit inadequate, albeit that that very round won the Battle of Britain, the largest air battle in history beyond all doubt. Those ahead of you will fire like that, but you try and hit an aircraft within that kill zone of crossfire while it's weaving about in front of you and trying to get away. You were virtually impossible. And it was virtually impossible because most pilots said 95% of bullets sprayed Kent and Hertfordshire and hit nothing. So let's go over now to our ammunition and weapons display, and I'll take you through why we were missing. So bear in mind, this is the Mark II Battle of Britain type Spitfire. And there will be another cohort introduced to you very shortly. Can they hear me okay? Yeah, yeah. Right, so we're just going over to Lucy now, our other Spitfire. She is a Mark IX Spitfire and appeared in June 1942. The reason behind the Mark IX Spitfire was a panic measure, because by then Mark V Spitfires were the king in the sky. Unfortunately, the Germans invented a fighter called the Focke-Wulf 190. Mr. Kurt Tank, chief designer at Focke-Wulf, two different named chaps, designed a killer aircraft. It backed up the Messerschmitt 109 fighter and became the best fighter overall of piston engine variant that they had. The Focke-Wulf 190, the RAF called the Butcher Bird. It was that good. Mark V Spitfires couldn't handle it, and anything below that. Hence, a stopgap measure becoming the Mark IX, which was actually that good by the time the Boffins had produced this aircraft at Farnborough, that it produced this throughout the war, despite the fact of higher marks of Spitfire, 14, 16, and even as high as 22. So the Mark IX was voted the most deadly variant of all Spitfires. And that's exactly what it is. It's a beautiful looking aircraft from any angle, but it's a killing machine. The RAF don't call them fighters, they call them a weapons platform. And that is the truth. Yes, it's a fighter aircraft. Yes, you have fighter command and you have fighter groups, but in all fairness, it's a weapons platform. Its job is to take weapons in the air and destroy enemy people, aircraft, and that's it. So we're just going to go round to the weaponry now. Now, I'm just going to show you something. I'll hold it in my hand to give it scale. That's the 303 round. Interesting, yeah? That little round won the Battle of Britain. 8 streams of them, 320 rounds per gun, times 8 is 2,560 rounds. That's all of 15 seconds of ammunition. Forget Hollywood and video games. Short controlled bursts, 2 seconds at most. Because when your guns are empty, you're a sitting duck. The 303 bullet started in the First World War, Lee Enfield rifle with a big trench bayonet. The Second World War version of the Lee Enfield, the number 4 Mark I, the Bren gun, the Lancaster, Halifax and heavy bomber turret guns, and all of the fighter guns, right up and including Beaufighter, Mosquito, Spitfire and Hurricane. We found out one thing though, the Germans with the Messerschmitt 109 had a very similar looking round, the 7.62 or 69, should I say, 7.69, but they also had cannon. Now, I think you can see the 20mm cannon is a far, far more dangerous looking affair. It is more dangerous because this is a full metal jacket bullet. The full metal jacket bullet means in the cowboy era, you had lead bullets. Nelson's Navy, you fired lead balls in flintlocks. Problem is with lead, it's quite soft, and you'll deposit lead in the barrel every time a bullet passes. With a machine gun, it would jam within a few hundred rounds, that's it, gone. So you put a nickel jacket over the lead and call it a full metal jacket. So that's where that comes from.
That's interesting.
The cannon rounds are not bullets at all, because that one, when it gets inside an aircraft, will explode. That one is armor piercing with a flat nose. Will penetrate 20 millimeters of armor or 3/4 of an inch in old money. And this one is a facsimile of, I would not be allowed to have an incendiary device in here. That would be phosphorus and powderized aluminium. Burns at welding torch temperatures. These fired into a petrol depot, forget it, it's going. If these were fired into a steam engine boiler, you'll have seen footage on the TV of aircraft like the Mosquito or even the Spit-9 firing at steam locomotives on French railways, and it suddenly goes whoosh. These would penetrate steam engine boilers, ship skin, and certainly U-boat skin. So very, very powerful round, and especially aircraft with credit card thick skin on the fuselage. The Americans, bless them, had the 50 caliber, Browning 50 caliber. You probably heard of it. It's quite, sounds posh, doesn't it? 50 caliber. All it means is half an inch. So it's half an inch diameter. All of their fighters fired this. That's Thunderbolt, Hellcat, Mustang, every type, Corsair, Hellcat. And of course, the B-7, if you ever watch Memphis Belle, the waist gunners and all the bomber guns with the 50 cal, still used to this day by the British Army as a sniper round in the Barrett rifle. And we still use this as a machine gun round, secondary ammunition or armaments on a tank. However, I digress. If you're actually flying your modern jet fighter these days, the cannon round is even larger. And this comes out of a Gatling gun. Heard of the Gatling gun? Yeah, Richard Jordan Gatling in 1850 invented the famous and it made 2 men into a rifle platoon instantly. So you got 30 men going bang, or you get. Nowadays, these can be squirted out of an aircraft at 6,000 rounds a minute. And believe me, I'm going to make a silly noise with my mouth. That's not da-da-da-da-da. It's brrr, and you've just squirted out around 600 to 800 rounds. So 8 seconds worth is all you've got, but more than half a second is enough. And it's more than enough. There was a big problem with our young men. Imagine this. You have had 8 to 10 hours on the Spitfire training. You have learned to fly in the Tiger Moth or the Avro 504 biplane. You put it in advanced trainer. And then into the Spitfire with just a few pilot's notes. No simulator, straight in to this very high performance aircraft. And you have to get it right first time or you're going to die. So many young men said the first time they flew this thing, it was lovely because it flew you. It was a lovely, forgiving aircraft in the sky, but very dangerous on the ground for novices. She's a tail-dragging aircraft. That means the tail sits on the ground, unlike today's aircraft has a nose wheel, and very difficult to land in crosswind conditions. So you had to watch that the tail didn't wag the dog when you get back on the ground, which they can do with a tail dragger. So these young men often had accidents early on in their career because they'd forgotten to use rudder input. And if you go to Duxford Air Show or things like that, and you see the Spitfires or Hurricanes land, there's plenty of rudder input to keep the thing straight because it wants to do that. We don't want flat spinning. So now I'm going to take you through something. So the Harvard to the Spitfire, Harvard trains to the Spitfire is like a Vauxhall Corsa to be then unleashed onto a Formula One car. Imagine that, young man in a Corsa straight into a Formula One car. I don't think it's a very good idea, is it? But they did. So we now have 8 to 10 hours training. He's never fired a shot in Hangar, and he's going to meet Hans Hahn, Ernst Udet, Adolf Galland, who already are aces. They've destroyed every air force in Europe, including Eastern Europe, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Holland, Norway, France, wiped them out with this state-of-the-art aircraft that Reginald Mitchell had warned the government about. Reginald Mitchell was invited to go to see the Nuremberg rallies and Hitler's monstrous great rallies that you see. Incredibly impressive at the day, but alarm bells were ringing. The big parades, the big lights, the banners. And Hannah Reich, the famous female test pilot, brought it into the open-top Nuremberg ring, the fighter, and took it round and round on a minimum radius turn and shot out. Reginald Mitchell had his stopwatch and went click, 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 went, my God, that thing can turn. He came home immediately and said, listen, you're going to let me cut metal. You've got to let me cut metal for this aircraft because you're going to lose if they kick off and use this aircraft against you. They didn't listen at first. This is before the start of the war. They said, no, it's too expensive, £12,500. It's too expensive. Complicated aircraft to make. We'll have the Hurricane. Hurricane's a fine aircraft, and we'll come to that in a moment. The Hawker Hurricane, incidentally, did 65% of the kills in the Battle of Britain because there were far more of them. She is the unsung hero of the battle. By far, she's the single biggest asset of the whole campaign from June to the September. Well, it's October. So I'll go back to Reginald Mitchell. He came home. We don't know who it was, but a very important minister. I'm not going to name him online like this. I think I know who it was. One of the big ministers pushed the government and said, look, you've got to let him cut. He's got a state-of-the-art machine, all metal. Let's go for it. Thank God they did, because that machine became the Spitfire. And the Spitfire was an incredibly important aircraft. It wasn't the only good fighter. We had the American Mustang and many others like it. So your young man now has to go up against this. So the scramble bell goes. The radar girls, they put ladies on radar back then, simply by the fact they're more pernickety and will do the job right. Because lots of women involved in aviation throughout history. So the Germans turn up with finger four. That's the technique. 4 aircraft, still used to this day, wing leader in that position, wingmen. He sends one of his friends in front of you. You chase after him. You're fixated with the kill. You're fixated. But this guy's clever. He puts a lot of left-hand rudder, right-hand aileron, and the aircraft skates sideways. You're never going to get a gun solution on him. What happens then is that one of his friends comes down, out the clouds, out the sun, and the most young men shot down, early Battle of Britain, didn't even know the aircraft that had done it. You're fixating. So what's the answer? Stay with your team. Let him go. He's gone. I can't catch him. I'll watch for his pal coming. I'm looking after your back. You look after my back. I look after, talk to each other. Stay as a team. If you don't do this, you're going to die. The RAF said, swan off on your own. It's half a day out with the Undertaker at best. It all sounds doom and gloom, this, but there ain't no points for second place in fighter technologies. If you make a mistake, you're dead. So it's a very dangerous game. Add to that, I'm going to do an analogy to you people. When you next buy a poppy, think of this. You're 18, 19 or 20 years. You've told a lie about your age like Jeffrey Wellham did and many others did. You're 18, 19 or 20. You've pushed into a Spitfire with as little as 8 to 10 hours training. And your girlfriend or your wife says, what are you doing for a job today, love? I am going for a gunfight 5 or 6 times a day. I have the petrol in the 2 tanks in front of the cockpit with no firewall. Top tank is there. The bottom tank is beneath your feet. There is no firewall. There is in the Mark 9 Spitfire, but not back in them then. So you're wearing the tanks. You have 15 seconds of ammo. The English Channel will freeze you to death. And the guys on the other side at the moment are better than you because they're already aces. Apart from that, not a bad day. Now, can you imagine such bravery? That's dawn till dusk fighting, not one and go for a brew. And you're put into this tiny little cockpit, which is minute. And there we are. You're on your own. It's your decision. You've got to look out of these little tiny perspex windows, using the control column and the throttle, looking at, forget your instruments, you're now in a dogfight. You can forget that, you can forget temperatures, but you must keep an eye on the fuel. The fuel gauge, the most important gauge in this aircraft. If you don't watch the fuel gauge, you're going to take a swim, or you're not going to get back home. So all this has to be taken into consideration, and add to that, you've got to navigate, because when you finish the dogfight and you've used up all your ammunition and you're over cloud, you've got to know where your base is. So incredibly important that you keep all this in mind. And in fact, on the early Spitfire, there was not much automation. You had to control pitch on your propeller. You had to control your your radiator flaps. On top of all this, you had to control mixture in the carburetor. By the time the Mark 9 came in, all that was automated, thankfully, to take the workload off the pilot so that you could stick to your knitting and do your job. Incredible aircraft. You can come and sit in this for a small fee. It's only £5, and come and visit us and have many iconic photographs in it. And we've done that a few times. I'll just pop out at the moment. Now, if you look here, we have a strange looking red tube. Well, it isn't a tube, it's a crowbar. If you can't open this canopy because of shrapnel damage and you need to get out, you've got to lever it open, smash it open, or with your revolver, blow it to pieces. Many, many young men couldn't open it. So eventually they got a retraction system in here called a lollipop, where you could pull them down and then boot it out with your elbows and off it would come. You then are supposed to roll the aircraft upside down and fall out. Well, that's an amazing achievement. If you want to try that, it's going end over end. The Germans are not forgiving. No fighter pilot is. They're very good at what they do. The highest scoring fighter pilot in human history was Erich Hartmann, 352 kills. 352 kills. The highest scoring night fighter race was Heinz Wolfgang Schnaufer, 141 British heavy bombers. Adolf Galland, 270 kills. These are very dangerous people to meet. This is typical of the Messerschmitt cockpit. It's only a tiny little cockpit. We only have, it was a film prop, this. And it's marked up as Jag Commander. That's Jagdgeschwader Commander, or Fighter Squadron. I'll just take you in front of Lucy, because if you want to see the Hispano cannon that's inside the wings of this aircraft, this is what they're like. Just to give it scale, I will just do that. Now imagine carrying that. No, these are the rounds again, incendiary head, remember, armor piercing, exploder head, mixed throughout the range of those. Okay, so this is the giant gun that you see inside Lucy's wing. This would certainly cause havoc, shot into an aircraft. So now we have to learn something else as a fighter pilot. That's deflection shooting. I'm going to give you an analogy of deflection shooting if you don't know what that is. So this young man has got to do all that in the Mark 1-2 Spitfire and the Mark II Hurricane, the other Battle of Britain cohort, has to learn deflection. What's deflection? Right, I'll tell you what deflection is. A clay pigeon shooter shoots 18 inches ahead of the clay so that the pellets have time to get there. In the old-fashioned era, when torpedoes of submarines swam straight, I fire at that ship, he's gone. I have to fire ahead of him, do the maths in the head to get an intersection. Correct, yeah? Now, deflection shooting at 300 to 400 miles an hour is this. I have to outturn the enemy, shoot into space where he's going to be when my bullets and cannon rounds arrive. That is deflection. You've got to be accurate. But this is now the RAF telling you you should do that from 200 to 400 yards away. And Messerschmitt fighters like that, unless you're Polish, all of 25 feet. Those very brave young men who came from Poland, Czechoslovakia, various other countries in the Battle of Britain, knew nothing of going straight up behind them or above. A planned form attack is a much bigger target area than a tail, and shoot them to pieces because they wanted to destroy machine and man. Reason being, I talked to one, Mr. Bonskevich, a friend of mine's father. He said, you didn't see what they'd done to us in Poland. We wanted to destroy them. So fair play. They came here and did a big score. You look at the Hawker Hurricane, she looks a bigger chunk of a bit aircraft. And she is heavier than the Spitfire. Would you believe she can very slightly, just slightly outturn the Spit? But she's a very stable gun platform. And the Germans could be infuriated with it. You can pump cannon rounds into the tail end, which is canvas covered, which would tear the canvas, go out without the cannon rounds detonating. Not enough compression. However, if you look at this also, we have the famous Merlin engine. And this engine was out of the very first Hurricane shot down in the Battle of Britain by a Messerschmitt 110 fighter, which is very unusual. Because a 110 fighter was a little bit nowhere near as maneuverable as the Hurricane, so we assume it was surprise attack from out of the sun, the clouds, whatever. Directly above, we have cannon strikes on it, and the pilot managed to bail out. But this was the very first Merlin-powered Hurricane shot down in the Battle of Britain. We're very lucky to have this. It's a very historic artifact. I can only tell you, when you watch Hollywood and video games, if you do that in fighter tactics, the sheer bravery and skill of these people knows no bounds. And it fascinates me how on earth these young men had the tenacity and guts and gall to do it, because they were coming up against a very formidable enemy. So people like Sir Douglas Bader said, our fighter tactics are not working, staying in box formations, picking us off. Throw away the rule book. We'll do finger four. We'll do it. Never swan off on your own in combat. Dogfight with them, with your team. Mr. Scalchi invented a brilliant maneuver. Immelmann in the First World War, German fighter pilot, the Immelmann turn, the split S, and other types of things. He didn't do the split S, it was another one. One of the techniques that Mr. Scalchi came up with is very simple. How do I make that German in front of me turn the way I want him to? Well, you can't. You're not in his brain. You're not in his eyes. He's in control of the aeroplane. Oh, yes, you can. We skate around in the sky. We're chasing. He's not becoming a solution yet. And then I slip sideways, he said. Side slip it. Oh, my goodness. He thinks I'm not going this way because he's turning under your guns. I'll go that way. It's obvious. You've got him. Mr. Scalchi then does a rolling maneuver, blasts hell out of it, as he said, as a pole. Sorry about the swearing, but that's what he said. Straight through. Perfect. The only problem is there's a tendency for collision. Or you can do it the other way. Same tactic. Slip sideways. Oh, by the way, excuse me for using my hands. He's now going to go that way, away from your guns. You then roll over, machine gun him on the way through. You've got a perfect spread shot right across the range. He did 9 kills like that during the Battle of Britain. Mr. Scalchi's maneuver.
Hi there.
We're coming up to about 3.
Thank you. I'm just sorry, I was just in the middle of finishing something else off, so I'm just having a look at Google Maps now. It's all right.
Sorry, what's that?
No, go on, you're right.
Oh, right. So, sorry, I thought somebody was doing it. What we're going to do, we're going to let you ask a few questions, but there are various hilarious stories about young men Spitfires, just to cut the ice a bit, because it's not all doom and gloom, thankfully. And would you believe a young lady actually took a flight, sat on the back of a Spitfire? Could you believe you can do that? Yeah, could you? Well, Margaret Orton did. She was a WAF in the Royal Air Force, that's Women's Auxiliary Air Force, a WAF. And what happened this day? Tail-dragging aircraft on airfields often bounce, nip over, tip over, and you smash the propellers up and everything. The centre of gravity has to be like that, seesaw effect, to be able to get the tail off and take off. Well, the ground crew often were seen sat on the tailplanes to counterbalance the aircraft down, and then the pilot goes, clear, and off you go. We've got photo evidence of this. So Margaret Orton was one such WAF, and of course, the pilot didn't do as he should have done. He whacked the throttles wide open and he's away. 95 miles an hour, he's going to get aloft. He's about 200 or 300 foot up, and he realizes he's tail heavy, and the aircraft's got buffeting at the back because Margaret is causing aerodynamic disturbances over the tail and elevators. So he said, I'm coming back in. There's something wrong with my kite. Air traffic control tower looked with the goggles, and all they could see in the report was Margaret's bottom and one leg stuck on one side, and the rest of it was on the other side of the aircraft. He said, you better look on your tail, there's something on it. So on his rear view mirror, each of these aircrafts have a rear view mirror to check your tail, your 6. Nearly there, guys. And what that means is this. He looked in his mirror and went, oh my God. So a very scared young WAF holding on for grim death, God knows how. He did a very careful circuit round RAF Hibblestone and landed. A very scared young WAF with a bad hairdo jumped off the airframe. She was taken immediately to the CO, who would not hear of it, that it was an accident. She said, sir, he took off without me oh yes, of course, you took it, yeah. Was it for a bottle of whiskey? Was it a vet, a dare? No, sir, it was an accident. Oh, rubbish, it's an accident. Nobody's going to fly in the back of his. You can imagine the scene. So he said, in any case, where's your RAF hat gone? Somewhere over Lincolnshire, sir. Right, well, okay, well, as a punishment, you'll pay for that, and you're 2 weeks furloughed to camp. Get out of my office. That young lady was taken as an elderly lady to the Battle of Britain memorial flight very recently, a few years ago, to AB910, the Mark V Spitfire, was actually the real aircraft it happened on. By sheer chance, it's been saved as a flying aircraft for the National Collection of the Royal Air Force. You were owners of that as taxpayers. She bent over the very same tailplane of the very same aircraft. It happened 80 odd years ago at RAF Ibblestow. And they said the BBMF took a photograph of Fly Past magazine, a very famous aircraft magazine of historic aviation. And then the editor said, the RAF said, would you like to have a pot of tea now, naffy, or repeat the flight? Well, Mark, it said Fly Past wouldn't publish the comments about the flying bit. I can only say that did happen, and I'm going to give you a website to look at. All you have to do is put WAAF, and that's WAAF, on Spitfire tail. Just remember that, guys, to check me out. WAAF on Spitfire tail. Thank you. Now, we always say one thing. They gave their todays for our tomorrows. Lest we forget. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was great. We've some questions come in already, and if anybody else has got any more, just stick them in the chat. But I'll start off with the ones I've already taken down. Owen was asking, said his dad went up in a two-seater from an airport near him. He wonders whether you've any plans to get a flying Spitfire up where you are.
You want to talk about?
Right, guys, sorry, just messing about with the technology there. Can you hear me all right on this new device? We've just switched onto a new device. Yeah, we've just, I think I alluded to before that the Polish Heritage Flight aircraft has just left us today. She's been with us quite a bit in the hurricane last year. The ultimate goal has always been to get an active warbird back here at Hangar 42. You may have noticed the display as we were walking through before, where we're currently rebuilding from scratch an original plans, an airspeed Oxford, which was a bomber command training aircraft. So we're currently on with that, rebuilding that aircraft. And if any of you guys there are engineers or like carpentry and what have you, please get in touch. But ultimately, yes, I mean, we're currently just about to launch a £400,000 fund to build a new extension to Hangar 42, which will become the future home of any airworthy warbirds that we manage to acquire. So yeah, absolutely. The short answer, that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, to have a Spitfire or Hurricane based up here in the northwest of England has got to be the end game for us. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're located at Squires Gate, are you?
Yeah, RAF Squires Gate, Blackpool Airport. So yeah, Blackpool Airport is at the moment. There was actually an article in the newspaper the other day. It was the 5th busiest airport in the UK last month. But that's where we're based in an original hangar. So yeah, you've got an opportunity every Saturday up until the 6th of November to come along and visit us here. Yeah,
because I think was the Polish squadron based at Woodvale. Am I right with that?
Yes, 315.
Yeah, and is that nearer Preston?
No, it's between. If you look at Preston, well, it is Preston, between Preston and South, Liverpool. Formby way. That's it.
Yeah. So you've got to remember every single Polish squadron was actually formed at RAF Squires Gate. The mass majority of RAF personnel, certainly air crew as well as ground crew, came through our RAF Squires Gate. And at one time, well, during the war, there was 800,000 RAF personnel came through Blackpool, making it the largest military training establishment in Europe. So quite a lot of rooted history, certainly aviation and aircraft manufacturing history here. But every single Polish squadron formed here at Squires Gate before they went off to Woodvale or Digby or wherever.
Yeah. And I know he was asking, I think you've covered a lot of this really, to be fair, but he was asking the difference between the Spitfire and a Hurricane. And he asked, why did the Spitfire become the hero of the Battle of Britain, really? I suppose if the Hurricane did most of the work.
Right, I can answer that in one question. The Spitfire is a very pretty, sporty looking racehorse. The Hurricane's a cart horse. A lot of people say that. However, in the right hands and trained hands, she's a very deadly aircraft. So Sidney Cam's masterpiece, but it was developed from biplanes of the era, the Hawker Hind, Hawker Hart. And if you look at a Hawker Hind or Hawker Hart, take the top wing off, enlarge it, the tailplane is virtually the same shape. And also, it's an all-metal wing, the Hurricane, and all metal up to and including the cockpit. But after that is the old wood and canvas stuff, and then later aluminium stringers and canvas. It made her a very, very dangerous enemy to shoot at, because she's going to come back on you, and it could be repaired very simply. But why does the Spitfire get all the accolade? Because it's a beautiful aircraft. It looks very sleek, ultra modern for the era, whereas the Hurricane looked older. I think really it's a case of, it's like the Lancaster always takes the limelight from the Halifax, which was its equal. It's a very brilliant bomber. So I think down to the press, I think the press was the main thing. Oh, the Spitfire Fund. You never, I don't think you heard of Hurricane Fund, did you?
No.
You heard of Spitfire presentation aircraft and many. So it's always Spitfire, this Spitfire. I am not knocking the aircraft, believe me. She's a fine piece of engineering. However, she always steals the limelight, and it's mainly down to the press, I would have thought at the time.
Don was also asking, how did the Spitfire compare to the Mustang?
Right, basically, if you look at the Mark 9, it's got a Merlin 61 or 66, two-stage supercharger, four-bladed prop. The Mustang came across here with the Allison engine, and it was quite, the Air Ministry were very, very, very upset with it, because at higher altitude, it was useless, the Allison engine. Great in the P40 at low level, and the early Mustangs were a flop. So what they decided to do, a gentleman said, can I have five or six Merlins? And they said, no. So why? Well, we need them for Mosquito. We need them for Spitfire. We need them for Hurricane. Lancaster Bomber has 4. How the devil do you think I'm going to allow you to have the entire production disrupted? He said, well, what about the Americans building them? Ah, right. So we send the drawings to Packard in America, who've got a finished shop floor space, the biggest arsenal of democracy, as they say. And Packard built Merlin, was built and powered the Mustang. And of course, the rest is history. The Merlin 61, 66 class gave the Mustang an incredible advantage over certain Luftwaffe aircraft, but is always voted the world's best fighter of all kinds, of all time in the war. When I say of all time, in the wartime, by experts. 2 reasons. One, the Mitsubishi Zero was the most agile of all aircraft, but it was lightly built. It would easily shoot down. Incredibly dangerous to fight with. The Spitfire was excellent, but its range was at best 400 miles or 40 minutes in combat without slipper tanks or longer range tanks. The Mustang, and we had an old fighter pilot, a filed man, just died recently. We flew Mustangs, escorted American B-17s to Berlin and back, a 6-hour flight. So you can imagine it was no better than the Mark 9 Spitfire in dogfight. And in fact, the Spitfire is heavily armed, more heavily with the 20 cannon, and it could slightly outmaneuver the Mustang at high altitude. However, the Mustang could go to Berlin and back. So you can imagine that was the difference. So the Packard Merlin built, very, very long range, almost equal to the Mark 9 Spit, and the Germans hated it. So that's the best way I can answer it.
Yeah, I just like to echo something that Colin has said, that he was on the flight path, or he's on the flight path to Biggin Hill, and he says the sound of the Rolls-Royce Merlin is very evocative, and I can testify that. I live up in Clitheroe near Barnholdswick, and I was walking across over the fells to Barnholdswick, and there was a couple of Lancasters came over me a year or two ago, and it was a fairly frightening sound, I must tell you. So.
Well, you can understand the Merlin engine, of course, in a Lancaster. I talked to an engineer once I was talking to, one of the flight engineers off the Lancaster. Why does it have that unique sound? He said resonance in the fuselage, like a drum. And so if you have 4 Merlins in concert in 4 Spitfires, they make a lovely sound. But that different, unique sound in the Lanc is the resonance in the fuselage. That whoa, it's a beautiful noise. But yeah, like you say, you wouldn't want to be underneath the bombs of a Lancaster in Hangar.
No, true. Wally was also asking, how many rounds did the Spitfire set off with?
Normally around 300 rounds per gun, times 8, it's about 2,520, that one. It ended up at 320 rounds per gun, so it's 2,560 across the range, all of 15 seconds. Or if you had the cannon added, 120 rounds in total, that's 60 per gun. But later on, the Mark 9 Spitfire managed to stretch it to 240, so that was 120 per gun.
Right.
But again, only 15 seconds in both ammunitions.
Yeah. Colin T from Cleveland's asking, what was the motorbike parked near the Spitfire?
Oh, right. That is one of our. Just bear with me.
Yeah, the Triumph. If any of you are fans of Foyle's War, you remember Foyle's son was a Spitfire pilot, and that's actually the bike that Andrew had. It's a Triumph Tiger. 1942, I think it is the.
I think it's a 250, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 250.
Yeah,
but that's the actual the motorcycle that you've seen Foyle's lad Andrew riding around on in the show. So yeah, Triumph 1942 Triumph Tiger.
Right, and Paul Haig, you don't mind me asking, he's wondering what your two backgrounds are. He says incredibly knowledgeable chaps, great speakers. What's their background?
Well, I think certainly from my point of view, I'm ex-Army Air Corps, so I served as a young soldier with the Army Air Corps in the good old days of the Cold War, when you knew who the enemy was. Later became a helicopter pilot, PPL. Didn't learn to fly in the army. I was ground crew. One of the proper workers,
yes,
in those days, and really my interest in Spitfires came from being a young lad in primary school, drawing Spitfires chasing Messerschmitts with swastikas on the side and shooting tanks with swastikas on them as well. But both my grandfathers served in the Royal Air Force. One actually did the topography and was a interpreter for the photo. I reconnaissance photographs that Keith showed you earlier, and the other one was actually an engineer, a senior technician, actually working on Halifax's airspeed Oxfords, and even qualified on B-17 as well, while he was based out in Reykjavik with the RAF, looking after the Russian convoys. So that was my real, later life interest into it. But you can't do nothing but learn when you're surrounded by people like Keith, who have put a lifetime of interest into it. But you Keith.
Right. Well, I started when at this very airfield, my dad, there was an air show on, wonderful air show, and I was all of 9, if that. And I'd taken I used to get in trouble at school for looking out of windows any time I heard a noise overhead. And in fact, I was in a game of cricket once, fielding, which I couldn't tolerate, and a corky hit me on the rib, and it did some damage. And I was watching a Dart Herald going into Blackpool Airport. This was the start of its interest, and the teacher said, "Maddock, what the devil are you doing?" He said, "Why are you looking at the ball? Look at the creases, not the aircraft." Anyway, that was that. So I got in trouble with that, but not to worry. We came here, and an English Electric Lightning, if you don't know what that is, it's Britain's only ever home-built, home-brewed Mach 2.4 fighter, which was about 1450 miles an hour. And the Lightning was an incredibly fast aircraft. He came straight through, did his display around the airfield, and then when his typical signature departure was to go vertical on full afterburner up. And they could go through the sound barrier, speed, I shouldn't say sound barrier, there is no barrier, the speed of sound vertically. And he got to a tiny little dot in the blue sky, we could hear boom, boom. And I thought, oh, wow, he's blown up. My dad said, no, he's just gone through the speed of sound. You were allowed to do that over land in those days. And that was it. That started my interest in aviation full time. So my dad bought me the Ladybird book of aircraft. Remember the Ladybird series? And then, of course, it went on from there. I joined the Air Cadets, and obviously teaching you to shoot, learn to fly. So I thought, well, I like this shooting thing. What about this? So I studied weaponry full time, historic weaponry right up to almost present date, right up throughout my life, really. Anything from crossbow right up to the nuclear option if necessary. But what we did then, we learned to fly a little bit there. I didn't take a PPL in the end, just flying chipmunks and other types of aircraft. I did leave. I was going to join the Royal Air Force, but I ended up as a motor engineer, and I went into advanced combustion specialist and hydraulics. But then I ended up working for a firm called Arvin Merritt, who built F-16 cockpits. Would you believe, at the old Wellington factory, Vickers Wellington factory, just down the road. And there we produced aircraft parts, TIG-ware, and there were certain elements called the TI tubes, which was a cover story for, shall we say, another industry. So anyway, that's my life story, but I've been studying aviation throughout my life, that anything from wooden string right up to the modern airliners, much to the disgust of John, he doesn't like airliners, but also weaponry and the history of World War II. But there's an old saying in our industry, and that's why I was laughing earlier on. Never mind the pilots, they call themselves the bus drivers. Nothing flies, sails or rolls without spanner monkeys. Thank you.
Absolutely. So what we'll do next time, guys, is we'll actually we'll come live from Keith's house. Don't bother going to Leeds Armories. Don't bother. It's old hat Leeds Armories. We'll have a night round at Keith's house, and we'll blow your mind with that one.
Oh no. Right? Yeah.
That sounds great.
Any more questions?
No, I think that's a suitable place to finish there with the invite round to Keith's house.
Be a few beers in it, guys.
I think the other thing to remember, chaps, is, I mean, obviously we have got the website. We do keep social media up to date, and what we haven't had a chance to show you tonight is where you see the Union Jack over Keith's shoulder there. There's the big black wall there. Inside of there is the UK's only full-size and fully operational Spitfire Mark V simulator. So you're just like you're looking at Vicky behind me there. You sit in a proper Spitfire. Everything works in an Andrew of Raven cockpits. We'll teach you how to fly that. The screen in front of you is 40 feet wide. Totally utterly immersive. And the guys who have even flown out of here today in the Mark V Spitfire says it's as original, as authentic as you're going to get it outside of flying the real thing. So if your kids or your wife are wondering what to get you for Christmas, an hour in the Mark V Spitfire simulator, £90 for the hour. That's what it starts in, but includes the museum tour as well. Just have a look at ravencockpits.co.uk. Again, you'll find the link on our website at the Spitfire Visitor Centre, and have a look at that. We've only really shown you half of the collection, and just I know you need to get off, but what you've seen tonight, we have this exactly the same again in our workshops over the other side of the airfield. Trying to expand the Spitfire Visitor Centre, certainly to the public, and to get schools involved is important. You know, look, I imagine that the demographic of all your members is exactly the same as we have in here. It's over 45, white British males, and it's our job really to try and get to the youth of today, to try and tell them about these stories that hopefully we've imparted to you tonight, and make sure that kids long after our generation has gone are still remembering the brave men and women, not only on the ground but in the air in fighter and bomber command. So you know, if you do get chance, I know you're all over the UK, but if you do get chance, by all means, come and see us. And if you ever want to arrange a group meeting in person and come and have a mooch around, then by all means we'd love to invite you up here as well.
We also have in the visitors, in that sort of simulator, we also have a Lancaster fuselage which does virtual reality, and that's only very, very cheap. That the virtual reality bombing mission to Berlin, I could not believe what it's like. It's unbelievable. You think you're there. The other one was Apollo 11 you can do in it, which is you're walking on the moon with Neil Armstrong. It's fantastic, and you feel you're in the cockpit with them in the Apollo capsule. And also the Dams raid, he does the Dams raid in there, and it's all VR stuff. But my goodness, I was absolute, to say I was gobsmacked. You've been in it, haven't you?
Well, I had a full head of hair, Roger.
Yeah, same here.
And look at what he did to Keith. So again, you mean just if you're a bit sensitive, you better not go on that. But I'll hand back over to you, Roger. Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Guys, great talk. There's obviously lots more to see there, but I think the assembled audience has had enough of our harsh northwestern tones, and I'll hand you over to the lilting, mellifluous brogue of a Mr. Aidan Coyne to give the vote of thanks. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, John, from the Avro Museum.
Thank you for that very nice introduction, Roger. Yeah, it's odd for me as being Irish from a country that wasn't involved in the Second World War, be neutral, but I still have a fascination with it, and I'm reminded that even as a child, over my bed, suspended from the ceiling by thread, I had a Focke-Wulf 190 being pursued by a Mark V Spitfire.
Oh, good.
And the reason I remember it was a Mark V is that my friend only had a Mark I, so mine was clearly a far superior machine. It lives with me to this day. So listen, Hangar 42, absolutely fantastic, guys. That energy and enthusiasm that you have, I mean, it comes across even on the screen over the internet. I'd love to be there and see the room. I think that your camera work is good as well, which is no easy thing to track somebody around. It was really well done. Your delivery was fantastic, you know. And the whole story is amazing, you know, going back to Reginald Mitchell being in Nuremberg and saying, hang on, guys, we need to get a bit of forward planning here. Now we need to think about what's coming down the line, you know, that how individuals, you know, who are committed can make a difference. And I think you guys fall into that category as well. I mean, the two lovely ladies you have there, Vicky and Lucy, absolutely beautiful. I particularly like the D-Day markings on Lucy as well. So it gives a nice touch. It's a big, I was in Normandy a few years ago, so that's kind of close to me. And clearly the restoration that you have is fantastic. You can see that in the detailing in the cockpit. I mean, it is just incredible as to how well that looks as well, you know. And, you know, as we say, we all love the Spitfire, but let's not forget that great workhorse, as you describe it, the Hurricane as well. And any show, I mean, they're the stars of the show, but clearly there's a great supporting cast as well. To see a Merlin Engine, there's a block there, see that as good. And I mean, I'd love to, you mentioned a lot of stuff, you know, we didn't see tonight. I'm fascinated by the artifacts you have in the operations room, in the scramble room, from the radios, the charts, you know, the chalkboards with the manuals, the maps, all, you know, wow, really, really, really incredible, you know. And of course, the other important bit is the weapons. And all I can think about when you see from a pesky little annoying 303 to the, you know, the 20 mil cannon on that, all I think is anytime you get in a dogfight, you're gonna need a bigger gun. There's no doubt about it, you know. And it was the one thing that when we've all the kit there is, and you very kindly remembered as well, is, you know, the brave young men who are, you know, I'd say there's very few of us here for whom they're half our age, or probably third or quarter of our age, the people on this call, you know. When you look at, you know, the danger they put themselves into, the number of operations a day, which is remarkable to think that they were literally up and down like yo-yos. Here we go again, and fatigue and tiredness didn't come into it, you know. And at the ground crew, I often think we're often hugely overlooked because it was a huge support cast there as well. So really, I mean, it's a fabulous story, and it's really well told, you know. And let's not forget the little bit of humour as well about it. Although I'm sure Margaret at the time wasn't laughing, but that too is a little. I find as you know, we've moved history from the big narratives about, you know, generals and master plans and invasion things down to the simple social stories of those little vignettes that bring it to life for me, about Margaret taking off in the plane landing. I mean, they're important things that add colour to it, you know. So really fascinating, guys. Well done. And I think the clincher for me, if there was to be one, because everything so far was just amazing, was the idea of going on a virtual bombing mission to Berlin. That certainly piqued my interest. So well done, guys, and thanks again. So on behalf of 41 Club, I'd like to offer everybody present tonight to propose the vote of thanks, and that we recognise the guys in the traditional manner. Well done, and thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Very good.
See you again.
Very good.
Thank you. See you again.
Cheers.
Thanks to those who organised as well, because I've met up with some guys like Alan Walker, who I used to work with at Woodford years ago, and I can't remember for the life of me whereabouts he worked, but I did 10 years there, and he's got the Vulcan in the background. And back in the 90s, we put the red nose on it for Red Nose Day, and we hand, and he was on the telly down the taxiway. So Alan, I'll be in touch. Thank you very much, guys.
John,
you're awesome.
Hang on a minute, John. Put your fingers in your ear. Put your fingers in your ears. My favourite aircraft's the Vulcan.
Alan did a lot longer than me. And so much. It was really, really good.
Thank you.
I can't wait to come and visit, and I still haven't visited Woodford yet. And I left there nearly 20 years ago, and I don't live that far away. I just never got there. So thank you so much to everybody, because we've reconnected with some people I haven't seen for 20, 25 years as well. So thank you. Brilliant night.
Any chance of a final question for Keith?
Yeah.
Corkin, is it true that old Land Rovers are made out of Burmabrite, which came from leftover Spitfire alloy?
Right, let me tell you a short story version of this. I met a guy who was did national service in the Royal Air Force. He'd been taken off the building. He was an apprentice building industry guy who was learning to drive bulldozers. And he said, "You'll guess what I did for a living?" I said, "No idea." We were there with Lucy, Southport Air Show, and he said, "You're going to hate me in a minute." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because my friend had a grab on a crane, and he put the Spitfire, minus of engine and bits and bobs, everything will become clear in a moment, in the gun butts. The gun butts weren't used anymore to aim the guns into, the brick wall at the back of them. They rammed the Spitfire into that and crushed it, and then his grab turned it and he rammed it. So it's a form of compressing thing, like you see. I believe that the aluminium then went not back into the aircraft industry, it went into the very early fledgling washing machines, and yes, the aluminium could be melted, re-rolled for the use of the Land Rover wings." And correct, absolutely. And guess where they were made? Was it Castle Bromwich area?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Where did they build the Spitfire? Castle Bromwich.
Ah, okay. I'll see if my Land Rover will fly.
So, yeah, you need wings for it.
It'll
Yeah.
break down first.
So you never know. You've got a Land Rover.
Be careful. I've got a Land Rover as well, but you need to, you need to get it British Racing green and camo on it, don't you? You've got your own Spitfire there.
A couple of guns on the wings, I think.
That's
Yeah.
it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, you never know. Your
It'll
Land
break
Rover-
down, but it's very easy to fix.
That's it. Yeah. Well, your Land Rover could
Loads.
All these lads sniping from the background, they'll all be BMW drivers. Well, this is, remember who won the war, lads. Remember who won the war. Better off with a Land Rover.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Top job.
Very much.
Brilliant.
I lived in Lytham. I lived in Clifton.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys. See you soon.
Cheers, take care. Thanks so
You're
much.
welcome to come.
Yeah.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks very much.
Okay, everyone. So that's the end of this evening's 41 Club Connects. We hope to see you at a future event next time we run one. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.